You might think I was blindsided when I found out my wife, Sarah, was cheating on me. But looking back, the signs were there, just waiting for someone to piece them together. We'd been married for 7 years, and while we had our ups and downs like any couple, things had noticeably changed over the last few months. Sarah had become distant, her laughter less frequent, and her phone always seemed to be buzzing with notifications that she would quickly swipe away when I entered the room. At first, I chalked it up to work stress. She had taken on more responsibilities at her job, and I figured she was just overwhelmed. I tried to be supportive, but my efforts seemed to create more distance. The affectionate moments we used to share grew sparse. Our weekends, once filled with adventures or Netflix marathons, became a series of lonely evenings where she would retreat into her phone or, worse, into meditation classes with that new guru she had started raving about. His name was Mark, and he was one of those bearded, sandal-wearing types who spoke about inner peace and enlightenment. I had no issue with her taking classes or seeking something to help her cope with stress. After all, it was just meditation, right? But every time she came home from one of those sessions, she seemed even more disconnected than before. I didn't want to be the jealous husband, but there was something about the way she spoke about him, her eyes lighting up as she shared his wisdom with me, that gnawed at me. Then came the day that changed everything. I had been feeling uneasy for a while but had no concrete evidence. It was an ordinary Thursday when I decided to surprise Sarah by getting off work early and preparing her favorite dinner. The house was quiet when I got home, which wasn't unusual for a weeknight. I figured she was just meditating or catching up on her breathing exercises. I had learned to respect her space, but this time, something felt off. As I walked through the living room toward the kitchen, I noticed Sarah's phone lying on the coffee table. I hesitated for a moment, knowing that going through her phone was a violation of trust. But then I saw it. Her phone lit up with a message notification that read, "I can't stop thinking about you." The sender's name was saved as Mark. My heart dropped. I picked up the phone, my hands trembling as I scrolled through their messages that detailed an intimate relationship that had been going on for at least 3 months. There were no explicit photos or anything overly graphic, but the emotional connection was clear. Plans to meet up, secretive language, and an overwhelming declaration of feelings. I felt sick. My mind raced with thoughts of betrayal, confusion, and anger. When Sarah walked in, I confronted her. At first, she feigned ignorance, claiming it was just a meditation buddy and that they were helping each other through tough times. But the more I pressed, the more her lies crumbled. She finally broke down, admitting to everything, an affair with the guru. I was furious, and the hurt was palpable. The emotional roller coaster that followed was unbearable. I went from furious disbelief to a crushing sadness. I had loved this woman, had committed my life to her, and she had thrown it all away for some spiritual journey with a man who purported to help others find their inner peace. The irony wasn't lost on me. After that confrontation, I felt lost. My mind was racing with all the what-ifs and why-nots. I thought about our life together and how it all seemed to have culminated in this moment of betrayal. There were no easy answers, and my heart hurt in ways I had never anticipated. As I sat there in the silence of that empty home, I realized that my dreams of a simple, happy marriage had shattered before my eyes. In the days that followed, I avoided Sarah as much as possible. I needed to think, to process. The anger festered, but so did a sense of clarity. I had to decide what to do next. This was just the beginning of my journey. What would I choose? Revenge? Healing? The road ahead seemed daunting, but I knew I wouldn't allow her betrayal to dictate my life any longer. After that confrontation with Sarah, I spent a lot of time wrestling with my emotions. The betrayal cut deep, and the thought of her lying to my face for months was unbearable. I needed to clear my mind, but every time I tried, images of her laughing with Mark, the meditation guru, invaded my thoughts. It felt like a slap in the face, and I was determined not to be the victim in this situation. While Sarah was busy trying to explain herself, I made a conscious decision to dig deeper into this affair. I wanted to know who this guy was who had taken my wife away from me. So I began to investigate. It wasn't hard to find out more about Mark. With a quick search, I discovered that he was not just any guru, he had a following. People flocked to his retreats, seeking peace, enlightenment, and a better understanding of themselves. I read reviews that praised his transformational workshops. It made my stomach churn. I found a couple of online forums where attendees shared their experiences at his retreats, and some of them were surprisingly candid. They spoke about not just the meditation but also the emotional vulnerability that came with it, being open and honest about your feelings. I couldn't help but feel sickened by the thought of how intimate those sessions must have been. It made me wonder how easily Sarah had fallen for him and how quickly she had discarded our life together. Rather than wallow in self-pity, I decided to turn this situation into something productive. I was tired of feeling like a victim, so I concocted a plan. I would disrupt Mark's retreats. I knew exactly where they were held, and I figured there would be opportunities to make my presence known. The first step was to gather information. Sarah had mentioned a few locations where Mark held his sessions, and one weekend I scouted out one of those places. It was a beautiful retreat center, nestled in the woods with serene surroundings. I watched people arrive, and oddly enough, I felt a sense of anger mixed with determination. These attendees were looking for peace, but I was about to make sure they experienced a dose of reality instead. What I found most shocking was how many people seemed to idolize Mark. As I watched from a distance, I could see the way he interacted with others, calm, collected, and wholly convincing. I couldn't let this man continue to deceive people, especially knowing the damage he had done to my marriage. I spent the next few days devising a plan to infiltrate one of his workshops. The day of the retreat arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. I had concocted a story about wanting to find peace for myself, which didn't feel too far off from the truth. I dressed in the most casual clothes I had, trying to blend in with the other attendees. When I arrived, I felt like a spy in enemy territory, ready to expose the truth. As we gathered in the main hall, I observed the room. It was filled with people of all ages, looking to escape their burdens and embrace the teachings of Mark. I could see Sarah among them, sitting cross-legged and looking blissed out. Seeing her in that moment reignited a burning anger within me. She looked so serene, so at peace, while I was about to rip that illusion apart. Mark began the session with his calming voice, guiding everyone through deep breathing exercises. But I couldn't focus on the meditation. I noted every little detail about how he presented himself, the way he manipulated the crowd with his words, how he made them feel safe and vulnerable. My plan was simple. I would wait for the right moment to confront him and expose him to everyone there. Eventually, as the session progressed, Mark led the class through some kind of emotional sharing exercise. I could see everyone pouring their hearts out about their struggles. It was genuinely moving, until I realized that it was also incredibly manipulative. When one woman shared her story about how she had lost her job and her ensuing depression, Mark responded with what felt like rehearsed empathy. It made my blood boil. That was the moment I decided to act. I stood up, interrupting the session, and cleared my throat. "Excuse me, everyone, but I think you all deserve to know the truth about this man," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of fear and fury. Gasps filled the room. People turned their heads, and I could see Sarah's eyes widen as she recognized me. Mark, caught off guard, looked at me with a mixture of confusion and annoyance. "And who might you be?" he asked, attempting to regain control of the situation. "I'm the husband of the woman you've been sleeping with," I shouted, pointing at Sarah. The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. Shock, disbelief, and concern rippled through the crowd. I continued, "You're all here seeking connection, but this guy is a fraud. He claims to help people, but he's just using your vulnerabilities to feed his ego and personal desires." I watched my wife become a shell of herself because of his manipulations. The murmurs grew louder, and I saw Sarah's face turn crimson. She looked mortified, and I realized that while I wanted to hurt Mark, I hadn't considered how this would affect her in that moment. But the rage coursing through me was too powerful to stop. I had to ensure that Mark couldn't continue to exploit others like he had done to me. Mark attempted to regain control, but the damage was done. Attendees began questioning him, demanding answers. I could see the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. In that moment, I felt a rush of triumph, even as I knew there would be fallout from this chaos. I was taking back control, and it felt good. As I left that retreat, adrenaline pumping through my veins, I knew this was just one step in my journey. I had disrupted Sarah's peace, and in the process, I had thrown Mark's world into disarray. But I was far from finished, and the consequences of my actions were only beginning to unfold. After the chaos of that retreat, I drove home feeling a strange mix of triumph and dread. I had exposed Mark, but in doing so, I had also thrust Sarah into an uncomfortable spotlight. I braced myself for the fallout. There was no way she would take this lightly. When I walked through the door of our house, I was met with an eerie silence. It was almost suffocating. Sarah was pacing in the living room, her face flushed with a combination of anger and embarrassment. "What the hell were you thinking?" she snapped. I felt my blood boil again. What was I thinking? I was thinking about how you've been lying to me and betraying our marriage. I shot back, my voice rising. "Do you really think this was the solution?" she retorted, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "You've made it worse. Now everyone knows, and I can't go back to that retreat ever again." "Good, you shouldn't want to go back to that place or to him," I yelled. "You think you were finding peace. You were just caught up in a fantasy, Sarah." I took a deep breath, trying to rein in my anger. "You need to understand the damage you've done." She crossed her arms defiantly, her chin raised. "You don't understand anything. Mark was helping me. He understood me in ways you didn't. I was trying to find myself." "Find yourself? Is that what you call it? Cheating on your husband, lying to my face?" I couldn't believe the audacity of her words. It was infuriating. "You think I don't understand stress? I've been here supporting you, trying to be the husband you needed, and you go and fuck it all up with some guy who tells you to breathe deeply. Don't you dare talk about him like that." She shot back, her voice rising. "You've ruined everything. Now I'll never have peace again." Her words stung in a way I hadn't expected. I had disrupted her fragile world, yes, but the reality was that she had already shattered mine. I realized that this situation was spiraling further out of control, and I had to find a way to regain my footing. Instead of engaging in another fruitless argument, I decided it was time to step back. "We both need to cool off," I said, my voice calmer but still laced with frustration. "I'll go stay with my brother for a bit. You need time to think about what you've done. I need time to figure out what I want." "Fine," she spat, her eyes blazing with fury. "Go, just go." I turned on my heel and left, my heart heavy but resolute. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I couldn't stay in that house another minute. The thought of facing Sarah after what just happened was unbearable. Staying with my brother felt like a temporary reprieve. He listened as I poured my heart out, detailing everything that had transpired. "Dude, you did the right thing," he said, shaking his head in disbelief at my situation. "You can't let her walk all over you. She needs to understand the consequences of her actions." Over the next few days, I settled into a new routine. I worked out, focused on myself, and tried to find some semblance of peace amidst the chaos. I'd allowed Sarah and Mark's actions to control my feelings for too long. My brother was supportive, but I knew I could rely on him forever. I needed to figure out my own path forward. Then came the texts from Sarah. At first they were filled with anger, but as the days wore on, they shifted to pleading. "Please, can we talk? And I'm so sorry, I didn't mean for this to happen." I ignored them initially, needing time to think. I felt like I was in a fog, struggling to separate my emotions. But as the days turned into a week, I realized I couldn't run from it forever. I needed to confront this issue head-on, but I wasn't ready to go back to the way things were. When I did finally agree to meet up, it was at a nearby cafe. I arrived early, my stomach in knots. I ordered coffee and sat in a corner booth, waiting for her to arrive. When she walked in, there was a heaviness in the air that felt almost palpable. She looked different, disheveled, tired, and less composed than I had ever seen her. "Thank you for meeting me," she said quietly, her voice shaky. I nodded, unsure of what to say. "I've had time to think," she continued, her eyes darting nervously. "I know I messed up. I was searching for something I didn't even understand, and I hurt you in the process. I'm sorry." I could see genuine remorse in her eyes, but part of me was still unsure if I could believe her. "You don't get it, do you?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Apologies don't repair the damage. You made choices, Sarah, real choices that destroyed our trust." "I know," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't undo what happened, but I want to work on it. I want to fix this. I love you." Her words flowed over me like a soothing balm, but I was still hesitant. "You loved me enough to betray me," I responded, my voice filled with pain. "How can I trust you again? You let this guy into our lives, into our bed. And for what? Some fantasy of peace." "I was lost," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought I could find something between us by exploring this other side of myself. I didn't realize it would lead to this." As I listened to Sarah, I felt my heart wavering. I had never seen her like this, vulnerable, broken, and desperate for forgiveness. Part of me wanted to reach out and comfort her, but another part of me screamed for justice. She had shattered my world, and I didn't know if I could let her back in. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, both of us lost in our thoughts. I had to make a choice, but the weight of that decision pressed down on me. The emotional turmoil was overwhelming. What did I want? Did I want to fight for our marriage, or was it too late? I still had so many questions swirling in my mind. But one thing was clear: I wouldn't let her find peace until I found my own. After that tense meeting with Sarah, I went back to my brother's place feeling even more conflicted than before. Her tears had stirred something inside me, a flicker of hope mixed with the bitterness of betrayal. I had always believed in forgiveness and fighting for love, but now I was grappling with a harsh reality. Could I really trust her again after everything she had put me through? The days turned into weeks as I vacillated between anger and sorrow. I'd lie awake at night, replaying our history together and how quickly it had crumbled. I thought about all the good times we shared, our travels, inside jokes, and the life we built together. But then I would remember her whispering Mark's name, how she had turned her back on me and our marriage. It was a confusing mix of nostalgia and hurt. In an effort to process my emotions, I started to jot down my thoughts in a journal. This helped me untangle my feelings. I wrote about everything: my dreams, my anger, my fears. Writing became my outlet, a safe space where I could pour out my frustrations without judgment. It was cathartic but also painful as I confronted the reality of what had happened. One day, I was scrolling through social media when I stumbled upon a post from one of Mark's retreats. He was advertising his next event, boasting about how transformative his sessions were. Just seeing his face made my blood boil. I realized that I couldn't let him continue to manipulate others. I had exposed him at that retreat, but it wasn't enough. I needed to do more. That night I crafted a post on social media detailing my experience. It was a calculated move, but I felt it was necessary. I shared my story, how Mark had affected my marriage, and warned others about his manipulative practices. I could see how vulnerable people were drawn to him, and I knew I had to raise awareness. The post gathered traction quickly. Friends shared it, and soon it spread to communities that had attended his retreats. I felt a sense of empowerment as I saw people responding, sharing their own stories of disappointment and manipulation. It was a different kind of revenge, something that felt productive rather than destructive. I was helping others see through the facade, and that made the pain more bearable. Meanwhile, Sarah had been trying to reach out, but I kept my distance. I was still processing the fallout of our conversation and wasn't ready to have another heart-to-heart. I felt she needed to experience the consequences of her actions, just as I had to face mine. I didn't want her to think that it was easy to win me back. That would imply I could just forget what had happened. Then came the day I received a message from Sarah that shook me to my core. "I need to talk, it's about Mark." The message was simple, but it sent my heart racing. What could she possibly have to say? Had she finally realized how toxic he was? Or was she still caught in his web of manipulation? Despite my reservations, I agreed to meet her. I chose a park where we could have a private conversation without the confines of a cafe or our home. I arrived early, pacing as I waited for her. The sun was shining, but I felt a storm brewing inside me. When Sarah arrived, she looked more composed than the last time I saw her. We sat on a park bench, the tension evident in the air. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice steady. "What's this about?" I asked, crossing my arms defensively. "I've done a lot of thinking and reflecting," she began, her eyes searching mine for understanding. I realized that Mark was not who I thought he was. I've been talking to some of the other attendees, and they've shared similar experiences. He manipulated me, and I was too caught up in the fantasy to see it. My heart raced, and you're just figuring that out now. I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. You were so quick to defend him before. I know I was blind and I'm so ashamed, she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. But seeing the posts you made online, hearing other people's stories, it opened my eyes. I've realized how wrong I was. I can't believe I let him come between us. Why should I believe anything you say? I asked, frustration bubbling to the surface. You've deceived me before. What makes this any different? Because I want to change. I want to do the work to earn your trust back, she pleaded, her voice breaking. I've started therapy and have been attending support groups. I see now how I lost myself and hurt you in the process. I want to understand why I made those choices. I took a deep breath, my emotions swirling. A part of me wanted to believe her, to see the sincerity in her words. But another part of me questioned whether she was just saying what I wanted to hear. It's not going to be easy, Sarah. Trust is earned, not given. You shattered everything we built together. I know, she said, her gaze dropping to the ground, but I'm willing to fight for us. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. I just need a chance. As I looked at her, I realized that this was as much about me as it was about her. In the wake of betrayal, I had to decide whether I was willing to fight for our marriage. The road ahead would be long and filled with uncertainty, but at that moment I felt a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. "Okay," I said slowly, "let's take it one step at a time, but know this, if you falter again, I won't hesitate to walk away for good." She nodded, relief washing over her face. "I understand. Thank you for giving me this opportunity." As we sat there in the park, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. It wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to begin rebuilding. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I wasn't interested in finding peace just yet. I needed to ensure Sarah understood the depth of her actions and that she would truly fight for our marriage. It was time for both of us to start anew, but this time with eyes wide open. In the weeks that followed, Sarah and I began cautiously navigating the turbulent waters of our relationship. It was a strange mix of hope and skepticism, as we both made efforts to mend the rift that had threatened to tear us apart. I found myself oscillating between moments of connection and waves of doubt. Sarah's commitment to her therapy and support groups was earnest. She spent hours talking through her feelings and reflecting on the choices she had made. I could see the determination in her eyes, but I was still guarded. Every time she went to a session, I felt a knot of uncertainty tighten in my stomach. Was she truly changing, or was this just another phase? Would she slip back into old habits once the immediate aftermath of the affair had faded? We started to communicate more openly about our feelings, which was a significant shift for us. I had always been the type to keep my emotions bottled up, while Sarah had often expressed hers without hesitation. Now, we were both learning to articulate our vulnerabilities. We would sit together on the couch in the evenings, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing what we had learned in therapy. It was a fragile truce, but it felt like a step in the right direction. Yet, even in these moments of connection, I found myself haunted by the memories of her betrayal. I couldn't shake the feeling that a shadow loomed over us, one that could reemerge at any moment. I knew that trust is not something you can simply give back. It has to be rebuilt brick by brick. It was a painstaking process, and while I was willing to try, I often wondered if it was worth it. Then came the day that would test everything we had been working toward. Sarah had received an invitation to a gathering of former retreat attendees. They were meeting to share their experiences and support each other in their healing journeys. She mentioned it excitedly, but I felt a surge of anxiety at the thought of her being around the very people who had encouraged her involvement with Mark. "You don't have to go," I said, my voice tense. "I understand you want to connect with others, but I can't help but feel uneasy about this. I'm going because I need to confront my past, not run from it," she replied, her eyes earnest. I've been talking to these people, and they've been through similar experiences. It's part of my healing. It's one thing to heal, but I don't want you to put yourself in a situation where you might be tempted again. I still don't fully trust the group, I said, the anxiety bubbling to the surface. Sarah sighed, frustration creeping into her voice. I can't hide from everything forever. That's not how healing works. I promise I'll be careful. The argument escalated, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the walls closing in around us. It's not just about you, Sarah. You expect me to be okay with all of this, to just trust you blindly. Trust takes time, I get it. But you have to let me live my life too. I can't be locked away in this bubble of fear. She shot back, her tone sharp. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I'm sorry. I just don't want to see you fall back into the same traps. The thought of her being around Mark's followers made my stomach churn, and I knew I couldn't articulate it without sounding controlling. But she was adamant. After a lot of back and forth, I reluctantly agreed to let her go with the condition that she would text me updates throughout the evening. I needed to know she was safe, both physically and emotionally. The night of the gathering, I was a bundle of nerves. I paced around the apartment, unable to focus on anything else. The clock ticked by agonizingly slowly, each minute feeling like an eternity. Just as I was about to call her, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Sarah. Everything's okay, just arrived and everyone seems really nice. I'll text more soon. I exhaled a shaky breath, trying to calm my racing mind. The evening stretched on, each minute feeling like an hour. I found myself refreshing my phone, waiting for any sign of her. Then, just as I started to relax, my phone buzzed again. Hey. I met a few people who were at Mark's retreats. They're sharing their experiences. It's really eye-opening. My heart sank. I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. Just be careful, okay? I texted back, trying to sound casual but knowing my worry was evident. Of course, I promise. She responded, and I felt a flicker of reassurance. But as the night dragged on, the updates became less frequent. Minutes turned to hours, and I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in my gut. By midnight, I was pacing again, my heart pounding. I sent her another text, "How's it going?" There was no immediate response. My mind raced with possibilities. What if she had encountered Mark's followers? What if they had rekindled their connections? I felt the anger bubbling beneath the surface, and I tried to push it down. Finally, just after 1 a.m., my phone buzzed again. I grabbed it eagerly, but my heart sank when I read her message. "I'm sorry, but I'm going to be late. We're having a deep discussion, and I'm really connecting with them. I'll explain everything when I get home." The words sent a chill down my spine. Connecting with them. I couldn't ignore the implications. I felt the familiar anger rise again, intertwined with fear. "Sarah, please be careful. I'm really worried. Just come home." I texted, my heart racing. The minutes dragged on, and every second felt like a lifetime. Anxiety coursed through me, and I couldn't help but imagine the worst. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Sarah walked through the door, looking exhausted but animated. "Hey. You won't believe how incredible this gathering was," she exclaimed, her voice full of enthusiasm. "Really? You're excited?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. "What do you mean by incredible? What happened?" "We talked about our experiences with Mark," she began, her eyes bright. "It was so eye-opening. Everyone shared how they felt manipulated just like I did. I felt so validated." I stared at her, my heart racing. "And what about the connection you had with them? Did you actually discuss Mark?" "Yes, we all talked about how he preyed on our vulnerabilities. It felt like a support group. They understand what I went through," she said, her excitement palpable, but I couldn't shake the unease. "Did you feel tempted at all? Were any of them still loyal to him?" I asked, my voice low. "No, they're all healing just like me," she insisted, her tone defensive. "We're all moving forward, and I'm not looking back, I promise." But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still navigating dangerous waters. I wanted to trust her, but the fear lingered like a shadow, and the thought of her being around those who had once idolized Mark made my skin crawl. I realized that while we were taking steps to heal, the road ahead was still fraught with challenges, and we had a long way to go before we could truly put the past behind us. As I lay in bed that night, I resolved to remain vigilant. Healing takes time, and part of that process involved ensuring that I was not just standing still while Sarah navigated her journey. I needed to be an active participant, not just a passive observer. We had both made mistakes, but moving forward would require more than just words. It would demand action, commitment, and an unwavering resolve to confront the demons of our past. I was determined to see our relationship reborn from the ashes of betrayal, but I knew that the path to reconciliation wouldn't be easy and the risks would always linger. The question remained, could we truly find peace again? As the days turned into weeks, Sarah and I continued to work on our relationship, but it was a process fraught with tension and uncertainty. Each step forward felt precarious, and I was constantly aware of the lingering possibility of slipping back into resentment or doubt. The gatherings Sarah attended were becoming more frequent, and while I understood her need for support, I couldn't shake the unease that came with it. One evening after dinner, Sarah sat down with a more serious expression on her face. "I wanted to talk to you about something," she said, her voice steady but tinged with apprehension. "Okay," I replied, my heart racing slightly as I braced myself for whatever news she had to share. "I've been thinking about the emotional support group and how it's helped me, but I also realize that I need to take it a step further. I want to confront Mark directly," she said, her determination evident. My heart sank. "Confront him? Why would you want to do that?" I couldn't hide the concern in my voice. "You don't need to give him any more power over you." "I know it sounds crazy, but I think it's important for my healing," she insisted. "I need to face the person who caused so much pain in my life. It's not about going back to him, it's about reclaiming my strength." I sat back, absorbing her words. Part of me admired her determination, but another part of me felt a surge of protectiveness. What if he tries to manipulate you again? You've worked so hard to break free from his grasp. She reached out and took my hand, her eyes searching mine. "I promise I'll be careful. I'm not going to let him pull me back into that life. I want to show him that he can't control me anymore." A mixture of fear and admiration swirled within me. I wanted to support her, but the idea of her confronting Mark made my stomach churn. "When do you plan to do this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've arranged to meet him at a public cafe. There will be a few friends from the support group with me for added strength. I just want to get closure," she explained. I took a deep breath, weighing my options. I could either support her in this endeavor or try to convince her to back down. But I realized I couldn't keep her from doing something she felt was necessary for her healing. "Okay, if you're going to do this, then I want to be there too," I said finally, my voice firm. Her eyes widened in surprise. "You want to come with me? I thought you'd be against it." "I want to support you, but I also need to protect myself," I admitted. "If this is going to happen, I want to make sure you're safe and that I'm there to witness the whole thing." A hint of a smile broke through her serious demeanor. "Thank you for understanding. It means a lot to me." The day of the confrontation arrived, and I felt a whirlpool of emotions churning within me: nervousness, anger, and hope. When we arrived at the cafe, a sense of foreboding enveloped me. The familiar scent of coffee and pastries felt almost suffocating as we walked in. Sarah's friends from the support group were already there, and I could see them exchanging reassuring glances with her. Then, Mark arrived. He strolled in with that same confident swagger that had drawn Sarah to him in the first place. My heart raced as I observed the way he carried himself, as if he owned the room. I could see Sarah tense up beside me, her demeanor shifting as she prepared to confront the man who had caused so much pain. "Stay strong," I whispered to her, squeezing her hand gently. They exchanged pleasantries, but the atmosphere was thick with tension. "It's good to see you, Sarah," Mark said, his voice smooth. "I've been hearing a lot about your journey. I'm glad you're finding your way." "Cut the pleasantries, Mark. I'm not here to reconnect. I'm here to talk about what happened between us," Sarah said, her voice steady but firm. I watched as she took control of the conversation, her confidence shining through. Mark's expression shifted slightly, and I could see him on the defensive. "I never meant to hurt you, Sarah. You know that, right? I was just helping you explore your inner self," he replied, attempting to backtrack. "That's not how it felt to me," she shot back, her voice rising slightly. You manipulated my vulnerability for your own gain, and for that I need to hold you accountable." The group of her friends stood behind her, offering silent support, and I felt a swell of pride in Sarah. She was standing her ground, confronting the man who had deceived her. I could see Mark struggling to maintain his composure, his charm failing to mask the discomfort creeping in. "People have different interpretations of growth. I helped you see a side of yourself that was hidden," he countered, attempting to regain control of the narrative. "No, Mark, you exploited my insecurities," Sarah pressed, her voice unwavering. "You don't get to twist this into something positive. I nearly lost everything because of you, and I refuse to let you walk away unscathed." As their conversation continued, I felt a mixture of anger and admiration. Sarah was reclaiming her strength, confronting her demons, and it became clear to me how much she had grown. The fear that had initially gripped me began to dissipate as I recognized her commitment to healing. After several tense exchanges, Mark finally realized he had lost control of the situation. "Well, I don't have to sit here and take this," he said, his voice cold and dismissive. "Good luck with your recovery, Sarah. You'll need it." With that, he turned to leave, and I felt a surge of relief wash over me. Sarah's friends cheered her on, and I instinctively wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close. "You did it," I whispered. "You stood up to him." Tears glistened in her eyes as she looked up at me. "I finally took my power back," she said, her voice thick with emotion. In that moment, something shifted between us. I realized that while the journey ahead would still be fraught with challenges, we had taken a significant step toward healing. We were no longer just two people navigating a fractured relationship. We were partners reclaiming our bond, ready to face whatever lay ahead. As we left the cafe hand in hand, I felt a renewed sense of hope. We had both faced our fears and emerged stronger. It was a long road ahead, but I knew now that we would confront it together. The past had shaped us, but it wouldn't define us. Together, we would forge a new path, one built on honesty, trust, and the understanding that love is not just about the highs, but about weathering the storms and emerging together, ready for whatever the future holds.